Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles, and here are the stories we're watching tonight. Body cam footage has been released showing officers racing through the Covenant School on Monday, searching for the shooter. And for the first time, images of the shooter who we see opening fire on glass doors to storm that school. But the biggest question remains, why did they do it? Then former Vice President Mike Pence has been ordered to testify before a grand jury looking into Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. And in what feels like a stunning reversal, a murder conviction that captured the nation's attention in that podcast serial takes another unbelievable twist. Could it mean that Adnan Syed is headed back to prison? And we're going to explain how a protest by a group of migrants led to a deadly fire at a facility on the border of Ciudad Juarez. And NBC has an exclusive report into how artificial intelligence is being used to make deepfake porn and the human toll innocent victims are suffering. And less than a week after tornadoes touched down just outside of Los Angeles, parts of the state are now preparing once again for heavy rain and snow. And the search for a motive continues in Nashville tonight after a mass shooting yesterday took the lives of 3 kids and 3 adults. Now, that shooting happened at the Covenant School, a private Christian school. And today, the Nashville Police Department released video showing exactly how the shooter got in the school and how they were finally stopped. First, police released this video right here. It shows the front entrance of the school with glass doors. And then the moment when the shooter opens fire into the school, ducks through, then begins to stalk the halls while those who were inside were terrified. Then police released more video from the body cams of the officers who stopped that shooter on the 2nd floor. And a warning, the video is graphic. And at one point, you will see 2 videos pop up side by side. That is from the 2 different vantage points from those officers as it all went down. Take a look.
Hey, give me 3. Let's get 3. 1 more! Let's go! Metro Police! Metro Police, open the door! I think it's upstairs. It sounds like it's upstairs. Go! Watch out. Move. Stop moving! Stop moving! Watch left! Suspect down!
NBC News correspondent Kathy Park joins me now from Nashville. Kathy, there is so much to unpack from that video. It's hard to see. But did the shooter fire at the officers as they were headed down that hallway?
Well, from authorities, it appears there was some sort of gun battle. And obviously, officials are kind of piecing everything together. That's all part of the investigation. But from our understanding and from what authorities are telling us, the shooting happened shortly after 10 o'clock yesterday morning. That's when they got the initial calls. And that is when, as you see there, the officers moving in, reacting very quickly. And it took just a matter of minutes, roughly 14 minutes before that suspect was neutralized. We were told that eventually the suspect got to that 2nd level of the story of the school building and actually began shooting outside the window at an approaching police vehicle. And then you see officers there in that body camera footage rounding the corner and then confronting the suspect, Gadi.
And I know we're learning a lot more about the suspect, the weapons that she owned, a potential emotional disorder. But there are also reports of messages that were sent to someone she knew minutes before that shooting. You spoke to a teammate, right? What did she tell you?
Yeah, earlier today I spoke with Ariana Patton, and she actually said that she was friends with the suspect, Audrey Hale, in middle school. They played basketball together. They were acquaintances, and they actually stayed in touch over the years. And to her surprise, when she checked her Instagram, the direct messages, she noticed a message from the suspect. This was right before the massacre, and she warned her friend that she was going to do something bad. Take a listen.
What would you do if you were sent a message like that? You know, it was just like, hold on, I don't really know. I sent the message to my dad, and I was like, do you think I should say something or find somebody? He texted back, yes, in all caps. So after that, that's when I started making calls. I called the suicide prevention hotline, and then they told me to call the Nashville's deputy office.
So it's just kind of mind-blowing to kind of put everything together, and that is Ariana's reaction. She's still kind of stunned and in disbelief that she got this message right before the shooting, and they were friends and have known each other for several years. In fact, she made contact with Audrey Hale earlier this month at a mutual friends memorial service. Gadi.
And Kathy, I see people gathering behind you at those crosses. What more do we know about the victims?
Yeah, it's another heavy day here in Nashville. You have seen groups of folks coming by, dropping off flowers, prayer circles. We have some images and some more information about the 6 victims, the youngest being just 9 years old. These are children, kids, babies. And one of them being Will Kinney. We are told that he was just beloved by his family, adored his family. You have little Evelyn, who loved Hamilton, loved kind of playing dress up, taking on different roles with her neighbors, just kids being kids. And then you have the 3 adults, Catherine Kuntz being one of them. She's essentially the principal at the school. She was dedicated to the school community. And you have Mike Hill, a longtime custodian who also loved the kids, and the kids loved him back. But Gadi, I can tell you, it's heavy here. Emotions are raw. A lot of tears as well throughout the day today. Gadi?
What an unbelievable loss. Kathy, thanks so much. And we've told you about that 60-mile-long tornado in Mississippi, right? Well, in addition to that, we are now learning that roughly 7 tornadoes ripped through Mississippi on Friday night, and they killed at least 22 people. They damaged hundreds, actually thousands of houses all across the state. Stephen Tyler Armstrong is one of the many people who lost his home.
My bedroom.
You saw his roof there, just completely ripped off. In a Facebook post, he said, quote, "This was my home, this was my childhood, and it's just gone." That pure shock is something that a lot of people are feeling, including sisters Brenda and Deborah. That's them right there. They lived in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, a small town of only 2,000 people. And after losing their home, they moved in with nearby family, which now has 11 people under one roof.
The whole community, the whole town, a little town like Rolling Fork, you know, just demolished and gone. In a blink of an eye, it's just gone. Never would imagine something like this.
And let's bring in NBC's Maggie Vespa. She's on the ground in Rolling Forks. Maggie, you've spent the last few days there. Where are people's minds at right now? And for a lot of them, where are they staying?
Yeah, so people are kind of staying in sort of a patchwork system of hotels and shelters basically right now. The hotels are being paid for with vouchers. One woman we met said that her voucher was good through April 2nd, which, check the calendar, that's Sunday, so basically good through the weekend. But after that, she doesn't know where she's going to go. Shelters here are open for the time being, but people are really concerned about the long-term plan, Gadi. Here's sound from one family we spoke to staying in one of the hotels just about 15 miles outside of town. Take a listen.
It's hard. It's very hard. I can't say that we're okay today. We're hurting. We don't know. Like, we know people can't keep us in the hotel rooms forever because they have to go on with their lives, and we just don't know what our next steps are. Our whole community is gone. We have nothing to go to.
Yeah, and so basically right now where their minds are is kind of getting the bare necessities, any semblance of normalcy sort of back online. And that starts with power and water. Those basic utilities, Gadi, have been out since Friday.
Praying for that family there. Maggie, I mean, can we pull up Maggie's live shot? I have a question. You can see there's a house behind you, but then it looks like there are wheels. Is that a semi? Is that a semi that's on its side in front of that house?
Yeah.
Holy.
I did a double take on it, too. Yeah, that is a semi. Wheels on one side, ripped off of the other, tossed into that house, which is partially collapsed. That is just one of many, honestly, scenes like that we're seeing all over Rolling Fork. To say this place is decimated is an understatement, as you can see.
And this tornado, it destroyed homes and businesses. And then there's all the little things you don't think about, right? I was reading about how in all of this, restoring little things like mail is so important. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you just think about those minute details, right? Well, people need to get their mail, but if they don't have a house or let alone a mailbox, how are they going to do that? Well, today, the postal workers at the local post office set up shop, set out card tables, put all the mail that they had in little plastic bins. People showed up, showed them their ID, and they got their mail handed to them. So people had to go get their mail because postal carriers were willing, but where are they going to deliver the mail to? All the homes are gone. So just little things like that. People are trying to get back to normal just a little bit. Gadi.
I mean, from the outside looking in, it is heartbreaking to see that and to think about that. And yet there is some comfort in trying to just find that sense of normalcy. We also know that this tornado struck a few towns where times have already been extremely tough. Does it look like enough help is on the way?
You know, again, it's hard to tell what is coming tangibly right now. Honestly, people are aware that the White House has declared its state of emergency. They're aware that the state has declared its state of emergency, and they're aware that frees up a lot of federal funds. But to your point, the poverty level in this community is so high. In a lot of these communities, this part of the country, this one was at roughly 30%. That's higher than the state average, higher than the national average. So this was already a place where people were really living on the edge. And now, in a lot of cases, what little they had has been wiped out by this tornado. So the devastation here, as you point out, just multi-layered, Gadi, for sure.
Maggie, I can't thank you enough for keeping the focus on such an important story. Thank you. Tonight, we're getting new surveillance video of that massive, deadly fire at a migrant facility in Mexico. What you're about to see is from inside, and it shows what might be the moment that started the fire. Telemundo in El Paso obtained this video from a source who works at that detention center, and a warning, what you're about to see could be disturbing. The Mexican government says the tensions boiled over in the migrant holding facility last night. Reports say some inside the facility had learned that they would be deported back to Central America and allegedly set fire to mattresses in protest, but that fire spread, as you can see. And this happened with 68 people inside. At least 39 of them died. And tonight, the Mexican government says it is helping the survivors, promising those victims will get free medical care and they will also be given green cards. They were all in legal limbo while waiting out the asylum process. And joining us now is NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, do we know anything about the people who potentially set fire to those mattresses? Well, could you tell us a little bit more about the people that were inside?
Yeah, well, Gadi, the Mexican president said today that the people who set those fire were migrants who were frustrated that they had heard that they might be deported, and so they're worried about that, and so they set those mattresses on fire in protest. Now, we have since learned that most of the migrants who were inside that facility were actually from Guatemala. There were some Venezuelans as well. But the question right now is, you know, what were the circumstances that led up to that? We also heard from relatives of those migrants today who said that there had been a roundup of migrants earlier in the day, and that the women and children were taken to this detention center and then released, but the men were kept inside the cells. And so there's a lot of frustration from relatives on the conditions in there potentially and what may have led to this much frustration for them to set those mattresses on fire. Human rights groups are also calling for investigations as well, Gadi.
And Gabe, what's the infrastructure to house the tens of thousands of migrant seekers, asylum seekers in Mexico? I know that we're hearing that they are now being given permission to stay in Mexico, but were they holding there in Mexico to eventually get to the United States? Or are they going to be allowed to ask for asylum here in the United States?
Yeah, Gadi, and this has been an ongoing problem. Many are calling it a humanitarian crisis at this point. I was in Juarez just a few months ago, and there were massive groups of hundreds of migrants who were trying to cross into the U.S. And even just several weeks ago, there was a very large group that tried to cross the international bridge into El Paso. This is what local officials have been dealing with, and what critics of the Biden administration say that the administration is encouraging. Now, today on Capitol Hill, the DHS secretary was actually pressed about his Border Patrol chief just recently saying that the Border Patrol had lost operational control of the border. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is coming back and saying that they are doing everything they can to secure the border. But Gadi, in just a short time, the Biden administration has tightened asylum restrictions, and there's also many people are wondering what's going to happen in May when the lifting of Title 42 happens. It's a pandemic-era border restriction that critics say might lead to a larger number of migrants crossing into the border. So this is an ongoing problem there at the southern border, and especially in places like Juarez, Mexico, and it's something that both the U.S. and Mexico are having to deal with more and more, Gadi.
NBC's Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. And if you've been enjoying the last few warm spring days here in California, don't get too comfortable, because once again, rain is starting to drench the west. Right now, it's coming down in the Bay Area. The National Weather Service has started to issue a few flood advisories across the state. Tens of thousands of people have already lost power as well. And with millions other wind advisories, we're also hearing reports of downed trees. You can see right there, trees have fallen on cars in Nevada County. Thankfully, no one's been hurt. Meanwhile, snowplows are standing by up in the mountains because there is also more snow on the way. You can see it coming down all across the Sierras. They might get up to 3 feet over there. NBC's Bill Cairns is here with more. Bill, just give us the worst case scenario here. What are we in for in California?
You had a nice break, right? I mean, you actually had California weather for a couple days, and then I know,
we appreciate it.
Yeah, right. And now you're back to, like, your typical winter rainy weather. I guess that's how it's been this season. So what a cinnamon bun! And we call that in like a weather term. We're looking at the satellite, and you can see how wound up the storm is here. And it's just a big bowling ball off the west coast. Very impressive. I mean, we don't get a lot of big storms that look like this on the map. And out ahead of it is all the rain. The blue is the snow. The green is the rain. The yellow. Even a couple lightning strikes popped up there. So this storm has a little oomph to it. This is not an atmospheric river. It's not going to pour and rain for a half a day or a day and a half. This is in and out in a good about 4 to 6 hours in most areas. Additional rainfall, not much from San Francisco northwards. We're going to concentrate the rain the rest of this evening from areas from Monterey southwards down to Santa Barbara. Not a lot around Los Angeles. Mountains a little bit more, maybe up to a quarter, most a half an inch. The snow, it's coming down very hard right now at all the ski resorts. It's still adding up. And from about Tahoe southwards, that's where the focus will be during the next couple hours. Notice that north of Tahoe, only a couple more inches is expected out of this storm. You showed the pictures. The winds are causing trouble. This is not the huge wind event that we had a week and a half ago, but we still have wind advisories for many areas, about 21 million people included in that. And at most, the winds will gust somewhere about the 30 to 40 mile per hour range. A couple isolated spots, of course, in the mountains will get a little higher than that, but they're used to that. But 43 Monterey and maybe around 45 in San Francisco as the storm comes on shore. So what's going to happen as we go toward the Wednesday? It breaks apart a little bit. We're still going to see hit and miss showers and storms out of it. Still some snow in the high elevations, but it'll be a much better day tomorrow, especially in Central California, than it is right now.
And what happens when this storm makes its way east?
I think that's when this storm's going to make its name for itself, especially as we get into Friday. So let's fast forward this into Thursday. It begins to get in the middle of the country. The energy's not quite there. The humidity's not really there. Isolated severe storms, maybe some gusty winds, some hail. Not a big deal. But as we get into Friday, it taps the moisture out of the Gulf, becomes a big rain machine, pretty big rainstorm in the Great Lakes, snow on the backside of it. But on that cold front is where we're going to deal with severe weather. Then it looks like on Saturday, mostly just rain plowing into areas of the east. cold and windy behind it. But the big day we have to worry about is Friday. That's the day where this storm will peak in intensity. It'll tap the Gulf. We'll have a chance of severe weather from Louisiana all the way to Chicago. This huge area and this enhanced risk, that's a chance for wind damage and isolated tornadoes. And I think we're maybe able to get a strong tornado or two, Gadi. And, of course, we saw what happens when you can get a strong tornado in Mississippi. It only takes one to make it a horrific event. That's what we're hoping to avoid on Friday.
Yeah, hopefully we see zero. Bill Cairns, thanks so much. And still ahead, Adnan Syed, whose life was detailed in the Serial podcast, became a free man in October. Today, his murder conviction was reinstated, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's headed back to prison. We're going to explain. Plus, a federal judge wants to hear from former Vice President Pence about what? You guessed it, his former boss. That's just ahead, so stay tuned. That was the unforgettable day when rioters stormed the Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And now a federal judge says the former vice president can no longer try to dodge a subpoena to talk about what happened. Today, that judge ruled that Pence must testify and honor a subpoena in a special counsel investigation into former President Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns has more.
All right, Gadi, I'll spare you the nitty-gritty legal details, but essentially there were two parts to the judge's order when it comes to Mike Pence complying with the subpoena for the grand jury in the 2020 election interference investigation. So he does have to comply with the subpoena, but the judge said that he essentially does not have to talk about what happened on January 6th. So he got a little bit of a victory there. This, of course, happening simultaneously as we wait for a possible indictment in the Manhattan DA's case looking into the hush money payments made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. We know that the grand jury will not be meeting tomorrow. We'll see what happens Thursday, but we know there will not be an indictment coming this week. This, of course, is all happening against the backdrop of the 2024 presidential election, and certainly that is something that the former president is very much thinking about. We saw that in his interview that aired on Fox News last night with Fox News host Sean Hannity. That, by the way, his first interview with Fox News since the legal filings were made public in that Dominion voting systems defamation suit, where we saw network leaders condemning Trump privately. Not a lot of tension in that interview, though. A pretty welcoming atmosphere from Hannity. But former President Trump did talk about the indictment. He did talk about the investigation, and he addressed some of the criticism around his rhetoric, talking about death and destruction, talking about the posts with Trump holding the baseball bat next to the photo of DA Alvin Bragg. Take a listen.
In your opinion, does this help you or hurt you in terms of your chances to win in 2024?
Well, if you listen to the fake news media, it helps. I don't know whether it helps or hurts. I can tell you, in my opinion, it's a new way of cheating on elections. It's called election interference. They can't beat you that way. They're going to do this kind of stuff.
And Gadi, at the same time as he criticized the investigation, called it election interference, he also talked about how it could potentially help him in this election. And we've certainly heard that sentiment from some Republican operatives and even from some voters, Gadi.
Do you remember that murder case that led to the podcast Serial? It was the podcast everyone seemed to be talking about for the longest time. It was a podcast that followed the murder conviction of a man named Adnan Syed. He was sentenced to life in prison back in 2000 for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Heyman Lee. And that podcast and all the twists and turns and problems with the case it brought up swept the nation and was credited for leading to an appeal of his conviction. And last September, Syed was set free. But today, his murder conviction has just been reinstated. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now. Hey, Ken, how did all this happen?
Hey, Gadi. Well, this is a dramatic twist in this case, but it's really more of a procedural issue. What the Maryland Appeals Court has ruled here is that the prosecutor didn't give the victim's family, Hae-Min Lee is her name, didn't give her family enough notice before they had that hearing where they asked the judge to vacate Syed's conviction in September. They gave them about 1 day's notice, and it wasn't enough time for them to get to court. So what the appeals court ruled on a 2-to-1 basis, a 3-judge panel, is that that means the conviction has to be reinstated. But it doesn't mean that Syed has to go back to prison. It means that they have to have another hearing and give the family a chance to come and be heard in court. And we have a statement from Syed's attorney. The Today Show obtained that statement, which says that they intend to appeal this decision to the Maryland Supreme Court. And they say that this is a shame and that justice for Hae-Min Lee should not mean injustice for their client, Adnan Syed. So that's where it stands. We have not heard from the prosecutors in this case, Gadi.
Does this mean that Syed is going back to prison?
It appears that it does not, because there's no one that would ask for that to happen. The prosecutor holds all the cards here, and the prosecutor has said he was wrongly convicted. And they've actually said they're investigating other suspects in the murder. So the prosecutor is really the only one that could ask a court to impose sentence and bring him back to prison, and they don't. Legal experts I talk to do not believe that will happen, and the family doesn't have standing to go into court to ask for that. So it appears that will remain free, and the decision also gave the parties 60 days to try to come up with some kind of resolution, and it looks like the resolution would be to have the hearing again, give the Lee family a chance to speak.
Such a bizarre twist. NBC's Kendall Anian, thanks so much.
You bet.
And after the break, a small change that could make a huge difference in the opioid epidemic, how making Narcan over-the-counter could save lives. But first, you gotta see this. Skiers at the Sundance Resort in Utah stood right here. Imagine just standing right here, seeing that cloud coming straight at you, rolling right at them. Take a listen.
It's gonna pummel us. Oh my gosh.
Don't worry, no one was hurt. That avalanche stopped just outside of the resort ski area. Yikes. We'll be right back. And it's time now for some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Former cryptocurrency mogul Sam Bankman-Fried is facing yet another federal charge, this time for bribery. He allegedly paid a Chinese government official $40 million to unfreeze funds. And this is just the latest charge Bankman-Fried has faced in relation to the collapse of his firm FTX. In Wyoming, the woman who set an abortion clinic on fire last May has finally been caught. Today, a judge released the 22-year-old suspect from jail, and she will now live with her parents as the case proceeds. And if convicted, she faces up to 20 years in prison for arson. And Disney is starting its first round of layoffs this week as part of a restructuring strategy. The company will be letting 7,000 employees go by summer in 3 separate waves. And so far, we know they've eliminated the entire metaverse division, which employed about 50 workers. And tonight, the water in Philadelphia is safe to drink, and it should remain that way. After a chemical spill hit the Delaware River on Friday, officials have been testing the city's water supply for contamination. But now they say, quote, the threat has passed. In Northern Ireland, the terrorism threat level is now considered severe. That's a step up from its previous designation as substantial. The change made by the UK's security service comes after an increase of activity by Irish Republican militants. This new level means that an attack is considered highly likely. And Gwyneth Paltrow's Utah ski trial entered its 6th day today, and so far this entire trial has been a big case of he said, she said. Paltrow is being sued by retired optometrist Terry Sanderson over a 2016 skiing crash for $300,000. He says she slammed into him from behind and left him with a bunch of major injuries. Paltrow, on the other hand, says Sanderson slammed into her and that he is exploiting her wealth. Sanderson's team has called witnesses so far that confirm his version of events. Today, Paltrow's team called their witnesses, including a biomechanical engineering sports expert who basically contested the Star prosecution's witness, reaffirming Paltrow's version of events.
We have two versions of the accident. We have Mr. Ramon's version, and we have Ms. Paltrow's version. I've assessed both using physics and biomechanics, and I'm sorry to say Mr. Ramon's version does not meet with the laws of physics. It's not consistent, internally consistent, and Ms. Paltrow's is.
And NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett joins me now. Maura, it seems like today was a battle of the experts day, and you just heard that expert talking about the laws of physics. What stood out to you?
Kind of an unexpected review of high school physics today, Gadi. And that biomedical engineer, his entire job is to focus on studying the mechanics when it comes to skiing, what your ski boot does when it gets into the ski, and what it needs to do when you're skiing. And so he, using very scientific stick figure drawings to explain this physics so that it could be understood for everyone, basically said that scientifically, the way that Sanderson said he was hit by Paltrow and then fell, those injuries he described wouldn't be possible. And so this expert basically said the way that Paltrow's description matches up makes more sense by laws of physics, centers of gravity, how those injuries would have happened. Now, we also heard depositions from Paltrow's kids who were skiing with her that day. They corroborated her story. But what really stood out to me today was a medical expert witness that the defense brought in. They laid out an exhibit that I want to pull up on your screen here, listing out a long litany of health issues that Sanderson faces. But the things that really popped off the page is the fact that he is blind in his right eye and severely impaired in the other. They said that he routinely walks into walls. He would ask people standing on the right side of his field of vision to move so he could see them. And he even adjusted his skiing habits to ski on one side of the slope so that he wouldn't hit anybody in his blind spot. Now, we know that this collision between him and Paltrow happened on the side of the ski slope, but we don't have any video. So it really ultimately comes down to all this witness testimony, Gadi.
And I saw that he routinely walked into walls. Did that stick out to people in the courtroom?
Definitely. I mean, this is something that with this long list of issues with medical history, and the fact that Sanderson himself has said, I might be misremembering things, I might be misspeaking. I mean, this was 7 years ago that this incident happened. And now looking forward in terms of the trial, we expect to see another 2 days of testimony before jurors can deliberate. And like you said, it's a matter of he said, she said. They're going to have to decide who hit who. But the other thing that I wanted to point out as fellow skiers, you know, the golden rule is that you defer to whoever is downhill skiing. Right. And that's something that attorneys kept bringing up in court today. They said, you need to figure out who you think was skiing downhill, because that ultimately will decide who is at fault. So even if they can't figure out the he said, she said of it all, it's really, you have to defer to that person that's skiing in front of you, and that who could be at fault.
So much of this really hinges on who was uphill and who was downhill.
Exactly. Not necessarily who hit who, but if you're skiing ahead of someone else, you need to get out of their way, because that's the golden rule in skier code.
And what comes next?
Basically, there's another 2 days of testimony is what is expected. The judge said this is set to 8 days. That's the furthest it can go in terms of testimony. We expect to see more witness experts be brought in, and then the jurors will deliberate, and it's in their hands.
Maura Barrett, thanks so much. And Narcan can reverse a drug overdose within minutes. An FDA panel is hoping that by making it available over the counter, countless lives could be saved. And an advisory panel for the agency voted unanimously that Narcan is safe. If the FDA gives it the green light, the antidote could be available in grocery stores, drugstores, even vending machines. NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal is here. Dr. Syal, what should people know about administering this to people who are overdosing?
Good evening, Gadi. The big takeaway for Narcan is that it's really effective and it's really, really easy to use. So for those who don't know, Narcan is a medication that actually reverses the signs of an opioid overdose. And I actually have some here. Back in med school, we got certified to use Narcan here in New York, and you can see it almost resembles a nasal allergy spray. So you have, you put 2 fingers right here and you have a trigger button right here. So if you suspect somebody's having an overdose, what you do is you simply put this into their nostril and press the red button and spray. And so once Narcan gets into the brain, what it really does is kick off those opiates off the receptors from the brain and allows somebody who may not be breathing or who may be unconscious to wake up a little bit. And you can give it every 2 to 3 minutes, but you really want to make sure that you're calling 911 if you suspect an opiate overdose. You can see here that Narcan is a little blue guy over there just punching the opiate off the receptor in the brain, allowing somebody to wake up.
So that's pretty instant. I mean, like, I know this is crass, but I keep thinking of that scene in Pulp Fiction with the adrenaline shot. Does it work that fast? I mean, is this similar?
It works that fast. It really is. I mean, it's not an understatement to say this is life-saving medication. We're entering a world where we're hitting about 100,000 deaths from drug overdoses every year just in the United States, many of which are from opiates. So, yeah, it does work that fast. It is not an understatement to say it's a life-saving medication. And by all accounts, this should be available over the counter, hopefully by the summer.
Now, how does insurance play into this? Does insurance cover this?
You know, it's tricky because right now, if you get a prescription for Narcan, you should have insurance coverage. But if this becomes over-the-counter, as many of you know, over-the-counter medications aren't really covered by insurance companies. So that's one of the big things we're watching for is how are we going to make this available to those who need it? And if insurance isn't going to cover it, is there going to be another way? Because right now, we're estimating about $30 to $60 for a pack of 2, and it's really not affordable for a lot of people. So that's one thing we'll have an eye on as the FDA makes their decision, Gadi.
Dr. Akshay Syed, thanks so very much.
Yeah.
And it is finally spring, and flowers are blooming, birds are chirping, and noses are dripping and throats are scratchy. We're talking, of course, about allergies. They've already begun to flare up for many. And scientists say that's because pollen is now in the air for a longer period of time. NBC's Ann Thompson has more.
These days, when Nicole Levin wears a mask, it's for pollen, not COVID.
My asthma has gotten so much worse with the pollen, and it's starting earlier.
Allergy season that used to begin in late March now strikes Levin in February, forcing this New York teacher to double her allergy medicine, but it's not enough.
From work, I used to miss 1 to 2 days during the allergy season if my asthma was flaring, but now it's up to 3 to 5 days.
The suffering is nationwide. New government research shows pollen season starts 20 days earlier and lasts 10 days longer. Dr. Purvi Parikh is an allergist in New York City. We know that climate change is making the allergy season longer, but is it also affecting the potency?
Absolutely. We're seeing much higher counts of the pollen and much earlier on.
There is 21% more pollen in the air than in 1990, fueled by carbon dioxide from man-made climate change.
As these CO2 levels increase, the plants are thriving even more so. And as a result, they're producing much higher levels of pollen than usual,
leading to more allergies, which can lead to more asthma. Asthma causes 11 deaths a day in the U.S. To combat allergies, Dr. Parikh recommends 24-hour antihistamines instead of decongestants. Over-the-counter nasal sprays and eye drops can help, too. For Nicole Levin, preparation is everything.
If I didn't have a treatment plan, I wouldn't be able to function.
To survive a worsening allergy season on a changing planet. Ann Thompson, NBC News, New York.
And when we come back, robbers stole my sister's leg. That is one of the many stories told to former NBC correspondent Martin Fletcher. He's going to share the incredible tales he heard from people all over the world and the ones he just can't forget. That's coming up. You know how when you hear about a tragedy in some distant, faraway place and you think, I am so glad I'm not there right now. Well, being in the middle of those moments was the life's work of one of the most incredible journalists I've ever had the privilege of working with. And we want to introduce you to him. For more than 30 years, the award-winning journalist Martin Fletcher worked here at NBC News, first as a cameraman, then as a foreign correspondent in our Tel Aviv bureau. It is safe to say he has seen it all, and he is now sharing some of what he learned in his new book, Teachers, the Ones I Can't Forget. Martin Fletcher, thank you so much for joining us. First, so good to see you, my friend. I think the last time I saw you, you and I had stolen a golf cart and we were riding around the Universal lot, right?
I think you stole it, not me, Gadi. It wasn't me.
Thanks a lot for having me out. I just want to say congratulations on the book, Teachers. The moment I saw the title, Teachers, it made me smile for so many reasons. I don't want to make you blush here, but people should know that you teach one of the greatest writing classes in the world to correspondents here at NBC News. And from what I took that class, I remember very distinctly that you said that as journalists, our jobs is not to teach, it is to listen, it is to learn, and then it is our job to report, and that the teachers are those that we have the privilege to meet. It seems like this is exactly what your book's about, right?
Yeah, you got a good memory, Gadi, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I met these people in extraordinary moments in their lives, and many of them, I just couldn't get them out of my head. And so in the end, I made a picture exhibition out of it, and I wrote a book about these children. This girl here is Evelyn, an 8-year-old girl from Kampala, Uganda. Her parents, both of them, died of AIDS. She was HIV positive, and she just left an indelible memory in my head, especially because of her school book. You know, she had this terrible life, but the way into her soul, you know, who is she, was, I noticed her school book, where under the name of the school, she'd written School of Struggle, and under the class, instead of maths or geography, she'd written Class of Hope. School of Struggle, Class of Hope. Well, who can forget that?
I think we have a little bit of that piece. If we can play that just from the archives there, let's take a look.
Before bed, I asked her what she dreams of.
When I'm with my mother.
You dream of your mother?
Yes.
Where is your mother?
She died.
Her mother died of AIDS. Her father, too, and Evelyn is HIV positive. This is her school book. So Evelyn here, under the name of the school, says School of Struggle, and the class, instead of science or mathematics or something, she has written Class of Hope.
And Martin, one of the things that you talk about in your book is, as a journalist, you would meet people on their worst day, and they would tell you their story. And with that comes a responsibility. And what you share in that book is just their message, their stories sticking with you over and over and playing in your head. What other stories do you have that you just that you take with you every single day?
So, Gadi, so many. You know, it was so meaningful for me to meet these people. It was a privilege to tell their story. You know, there's in social media there are so many ways to talk, but there's so few ways to be heard. And I think bringing the camera to these people's lives and showing them that somebody cares was a huge contribution to those people. But what I came away with were the lessons that I learned from all these people, which basically, you know, I always joked that I wanted to write a book about what I learned in my career, and I joked it would have to be a pretty small book. You know, because I kept learning the same message, the same thing all the time, which is that you have to carry on. You know, terrible things happen to people. You don't have a choice but to carry on. And I stayed in touch with some of these people, and I just learned so much about life, and that's what I wanted to reflect in the book. The people I met and what I learned from them, and they're all universal lessons.
I got to ask, Martin, do you think that journalists are doing a good enough job these days listening to teachers?
No. No, I don't. Some do. You know, it's a very individual thing. Some people really do get out, and you can see them really telling the stories of the people. But there are so many voices to be heard these days. You know, there's so much news, and it's coming from so many different areas and directions that, and there's so many platforms that journalists today have to feed their stories to. They don't have the time. I had a lot of time. You know, you began in the very beginning of this segment by talking about the one girl said to me, "Robbers stole my sister's leg." You know, she was an albino child in Tanzania, and albino body parts are valued by doctors, by people who mistreat. I mean, I don't know how to describe these people. They literally steal body parts, and they murder albinos, steal their body parts. A leg is the most valuable part of the body. It costs $2,000 for an albino leg, believe it or not. And they use the bones into. They believe it helps them find gold. It helps them find more fish, albino hair. Anyway, so when we heard about this, we took 2 days to to make our way through the jungle to one clinic where this little girl was hiding in order to tell her story. I can't see anyone doing that today. And it's a tragedy, it's a pity.
And what's your biggest advice to people that are working in the field of journalism right now?
Compassion. Be curious, be compassionate, care about the people you meet, and take it upon yourself a major obligation to tell their story fairly and accurately. I'm not looking for in politics, in the political world, we talk about objectivity. I always wanted to meet people and be fair and tell their story in an accurate manner And I think that's what my advice to journalists, to all journalists, be fair to the people you're reporting on, care about them, and then your story that you tell will be the real thing. It'll be a good story. You can't write a good story unless you've got a good story. And to get a good story, you've got to work hard. That's the bad news.
And you got to listen, as you've taught all of us. Martin Fletcher, thanks so much. The book is called Teachers, The Ones I Can't Forget. Martin, you're a teacher I will never forget. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gadi. Thank you very much.
When we come back, deepfakes. AI makes some videos seem incredibly real, but now it's taken a very dangerous turn into pornography, and without the consent of women whose faces were digitally added. That's up just after the break. And by now, you've probably heard the term deepfakes. They are those videos created using artificial intelligence that can replace a person's face with another person's face, even mirroring facial expressions. And you might have seen some of these clips pop up online. Take a look.
What's up, TikTok? You guys cool if I play some sports?
As an actor, I pretend for a living. I play fictitious characters, often solving fictitious problems.
The first one, not Tom Cruise. Pretty realistic, though, right? Well, in some corners of the internet, things are getting super, super creepy. An NBC News investigation found the most common use of deepfakes is for sexually explicit videos, and the overwhelming majority feature women who never agreed to the creation of that content. And some people are using major credit cards to fuel that deepfake economy. NBC News Digital and Tech Culture reporter Kat Tinbarge joins me now with more on this investigation. Kat, can you explain how the deepfake economy works? How are people making money off of this?
Sure. So the websites that I looked at for this investigation, these are those pornographic videos that feature women who never consented to the production of these videos. So, for example, popular celebrities are often featured in these non-consensual videos, as well as popular influencers, even politicians, even journalists. And so we're seeing a rising demand for this type of content, and websites are popping up that resemble their more mainstream pornographic counterparts. So one of the websites I looked at is really similar in function to OnlyFans, which is a subscription model website. And on this version, you're able to market these deepfake videos. So for example, I saw users who were selling libraries with thousands of deepfake celebrity videos for as little as $5. And when you pay that $5, which you can do with Visa or MasterCard, you can then download those thousands of videos.
And Kat, one of the other things, I remember seeing a lot of these, and I was trying to figure out what it was. Emma Watson was being used a lot, and it looked like they were selling a program or selling an app to basically allow people to make their own deepfake videos. And this was being posted on major companies. Like, you've got social media companies that we all know. It was regularly popping up there. Is there anything that can be done to stop that, especially when it comes to like a mainstream platform like that?
For sure. Great question. So for example, Google, the biggest search engine in the world, when you type in words like deepfake and pornography, Google will rank search results very highly that take you to these websites where you can pay for this type of content. And even though involuntary fake pornography is against Google's search content guidelines, they're relying on individuals who have been directly affected, the victims of this kind of content, to report it first. So what we're seeing is that these tech companies are not proactively taking down this type of content. Those ads featuring Emma Watson and Scarlett Johansson's likeness are another example. These ads were running all over Facebook. It took NBC News reaching out for them to realize and take it down. So we're not seeing a lot of proactive action. We're taking a lot of reactive steps, but it's too little, too late.
And I know you've been speaking to some people that have been victims of this type of thing. There is a huge human toll to all this, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, think about it. This technology can be used to swap a pornographic actress's face with Emma Watson's, but it could also be used for an everyday woman who isn't famous or even a child. I've heard stories of how this has been used in schools to bully children. Children are doing this to each other. I've also spoken to advocates who have been targeted with this type of abuse for years. And even if they go to a company like Google or one of these websites and request that the content is taken down, because it's able to be downloaded, it can just be re-uploaded anywhere else. It's like chasing a needle in the haystack, but the haystack is everywhere. The needles are everywhere, and there's no way to take them all down at once.
It's, I mean, there's no other word for it. It's disgusting. What's your advice to do if you see some of those ads or see something like that cross your feed?
A lot of what we're noticing right now is that as these topics are being discussed more, this is driving more people to these websites. So the voices that we're hearing from are not necessarily the people who are being affected. There are advocates who I've spoken to who are looking to find ways that a global network can start to respond to these issues. For example, in Australia, legislation was passed to make this illegal, but if the person creating the content is in the United States or the UK or Asia, then the person in Australia can't necessarily sue them very easily. And so the problem here is really a global one, and it will take a global solution in order to stem the flood of these videos.
I know a lot of parents are going to be watching this and they're going to be like, wait, hold on. How do I protect my child from possibly being used, or my middle schooler or my high schooler being bullied in this way when everybody's posting on social media on a daily basis?
There's no easy solution, but this is the type of issue that should be on people's minds. When they think about where the image, where the likeness of your child or yourself is going, these are the types of things that people need to consider.
Such a horrible direction all of this is headed. Kat Tinnenbarge, thanks so much. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.